Hello, it is April 27th, and we're reading Atomic Anna by Rachel Barenbaum. So as always, I have to make sure it's on the right thing. I like to show you what she looks like, and I looked up a few argots, saying 100 million times. I also, Elaine, from the author of Abandoned Stars, an epic adventure as 3 generations of women work together and travel through time to prevent the Chernobyl disaster and right the wrongs of their past. Let's see, one here. All right, I can, so there, anyway, there's a longer summary. Elaine, I'm just going to put it in the chat if you want to take a quick look at it. To refresh yourself.
I don't remember all the details, but I remember the basic of the plot.
Right. And right.
And I know I liked this one a lot more than I liked To Bend in the Stars.
Yeah. Although I like that too. Anyway, let's see if somebody who's okay. So this is what she looks like. You know, she's relatively young, and this one has a lot of science, and so did A Bend in the Stars. I mean, obviously this is her thing. Terry, do you want to unmute and tell us your personal connection?
Terry put a message in the chat that she's having trouble unmuting or getting.
Oh wait, let's see. Oh wait.
Maybe you can unmute.
That's what I'm trying to do here. All right, she's in Portland. Well, she can maybe comment. I'll just tell you what she told me. Oh no. The connection, I think, is with her daughter, but she's met Rachel in person, and she gave her this book, and what a nice person she was. You can put in the message, Terry, what your connection was. I can't remember which relative knows her. Anyway, so let me get back. Did you like the book? Paula? Yeah. Oh, Jesse didn't like it. We have 55 minutes to change your mind, Jesse. Paula?
Well, I'd like to say it took me over 200 pages to like the book. And now I feel that I want 3 hours of college credit from the Vanessa Ehrlich adult education, because this was a BALL buster.
Yeah.
It took a lot to stay focused. It was well worth it. The effort was worth it, but it was the easiest read I've ever had.
So Lynn Darren said she didn't get through it. If I'm having a hard time, and hopefully I don't assign a book that's a hard time, and I already have next month's, and it's going to be super easy, but I listened to the audio, and the audio of this was really, really good. And I like to flip in between, because then if you miss something while you're listening to it, you can go back and pick it up, and who are they talking about? Because I know some people, these split screen books, which I find are, a dime a dozen, literally, almost so many, the Matchmaker, even the books we've read.
Yeah.
This going back and forth can be very confusing.
Right. At least in this book, one thing they did do is at the header of each chapter, they put down whose voice it was and what year and month it was.
Yes.
There's one I'm reading right now that is jumping all over the place, and all it says is like chapter 3.
What book are you reading?
It's A Swing Time by Zadie Smith.
Oh, yeah. I find Zadie Smith difficult.
Yeah, it's for a book group that's supposed to be reading books that are important to women.
Yeah. Right, well, let's get to the premise of the book, that she's jumping through time. The Jewishness, I think, is all through the book, leaving Russia and that part. But for me, I have other specific questions, but this is the one that kept me up at night. If you're going to go back in time, why wouldn't you kill Hitler?
Yeah.
Why would you? Not that Chernobyl wasn't terrible, but if I had a choice and she had been in Germany and she spoke German and she knew the whatever, why didn't you go? Why didn't you go try to kill Hitler? I don't know. Maybe it wasn't realistic. I don't know. Paula.
Well, I think her focus was on improving herself when she realized that she had so many flaws.
And what she had been responsible for.
So I think that was the focus, not that your premise is not absolutely 100% correct, but I think that the way the author developed the character was that she had to correct her personal flaws in her life, and that involved something different than her greater good was somewhere else,
Right. I mean, that part of the story I really appreciated and like that, she it's slipping from me. It's Anna. What is it?
Raisa and
Raisa and what's
Juliet?
Molly.
Manya. That she went back to help Raisa, that she went, that was, and that you have to concentrate on yourselves. Here we go. Oh, from Terry, you can see Rachel's a good friend and neighbor of my son and daughter-in-law. I knew we had Rosh Hashanah lunch at her home. Ooh, she and her husband both attended Harvard, of course, where he is still a professor. She ran a hedge fund, of course, before she became a writer. She's a lovely, very warm person. Yeah, I bet.
Obviously, it's a real scientific bent.
Yes.
Both of these books were very scientific in nature. However, as a scientist, I found the time travel one a lot easier to grasp.
Agreed.
That concept is in a lot of books.
Yeah.
Whereas the bend in the stars and all the maths, that was really
hard,
challenging for me to take the leap of faith and really understand that.
And although this one has Russian names, Bend in the Star, I had to write down all those Russian names, and it's really interesting. When you have foreign names, it's hard. Arthur and I have watched some Korean Netflix things, and everyone's name sounds the same. Yeah. And I go back and read what name, who's talking, but and the Russian names are long and they're just not what we're used to. And so I think that this I thought was more manageable than Bend in the Stars. And I thought that the characters Anna for me kind of was like, you like her, you don't like her, you like her again. And and every time she went back in time, everything changed a little bit, and the pictures, and it's like Back to the Future with Michael J. Fox. So that type of thing, I thought, it was interesting. Any other, Andy, and then Paula.
I did struggle somewhat. I listened to it I'm comfortable with the split screen, the present, the past. There were a lot of in-betweens with the time travel. So listening to it a couple times, I was lost, but I rather picked up. I have a very naive and perhaps really stupid question. I don't understand how Molly knew to draw cartoons about Atomic Anna, the comic books.
I mean, people can jump in. I think that was her passion, drawing.
And
And
the guy gave her comic books across the street.
exactly,
And she knew her birth mother was a scientist.
right, right.
So,
But all
Um,
the stuff in the comic books was real. Those things
Did she
actually
know
happened.
she was Anna? Did she know she was Anna? Her birth
Eventually
mother?
she
She
did.
didn't know that story.
Right,
No.
not at the beginning, no.
Out at the beginning.
So that threw me off a little bit. How, I know you have to just sort of accept some things in literature, like, how did she come up with that character with that name?
Yeah, sometimes it's suspension of disbelief.
Exactly.
Yeah. Although I do think she knew her mom had a good friend, Anna, and they were scientists and they were left behind in Russia. And Paula.
Well, I was drawn by the sadness of these women being kind of not nurtured by their own mothers,
Yeah.
and that how that shapes you and changes you in life.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to have this feeling of not feeling completely loved and being completely whole because you have missed that maternal love. So that struck me as a thread throughout the book.
Yeah.
And when Anna had this baby, that she had crushing postpartum depression, among other things. And besides all the other problems in her life, could not raise this child, was a geriatric mother in her early 40s at that time. It was pretty unusual to bear a baby in that culture. That was very, very sad to me. That really broke my heart.
Listen,
And
I think postpartum, when Diana, Princess Diana had postpartum, nobody knew. No, listen, there's other things going on there, but
Yeah.
now people at least know to check for it,
Yeah.
Right. Now doctors tell mothers,
Yeah.
if you're feeling XYZ, you contact me tonight, not tomorrow, not the next day.
Yeah.
Immediately.
And she was also 43 years old.
Yes.
That's right.
And she didn't know that she really didn't think she wanted to be a mother. And by the end of the book, yes, she loves her daughter.
Yeah.
That all came, I think
Yeah.
as a surprise to her too,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
she didn't really want to have a child. She just wanted to work, work, work. So probably some of it was postpartum, but I think she just really didn't feel that she could be a mother because she had too many other things to do, her work.
Yeah.
Oh, and I think that was her struggle,
Yeah.
just that conflict. Do I save the world? Do I save my my
Right.
children, my family? And her friend kept on telling her, you need to do
Right.
this.
Right.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I think
Yeah,
that was
But it
really
was,
difficult.
she had no concept of motherhood based on what she thought. She didn't know her mother. She saw a mother who never was around. So she didn't want to be like her mother. She didn't want to perpetuate that.
Yeah.
I felt sorry for her at that point.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I really did.
Well, you
And-
feel sorry that nobody diagnoses her deep, deep depression.
Yes.
And would that have changed had she been diagnosed? Would she have raised the child? I mean, her conflict would have still been there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know in that time frame if that was a widely diagnosed or widely treated.
Probably not.
illness.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
I do think the way the Russian government treated her, Anna, is absolutely on target.
Yeah.
What they did to people who tried to come to America or they thought were refuseniks, or they were so paranoid. And back in the in the 80s, and that it flitted through that time period. I had colleagues who went to Russia and they brought Jewish prayer books and menorahs and ritual items and all of that type of stuff. But people followed them through their whole trip. I mean, that whole society was built on paranoia. And as when my kids were little, I had three like Russian nannies. And to a one, they didn't want us to know where they lived. I would say, I'll take you home. She goes, you can drop me at this corner. Like, They were all like that.
Yeah.
Finally, the last one said I knew where she lived, but I didn't. I mean, I just knew the building, and it's absolutely fascinating. There are a ton of Russians in the Chicagoland area who came here, and some of them joined synagogues, but they don't like being on lists. They don't like you having their information, and that is, a broad pendulum swing for what was happening in Russia. And that's how I interpret.
Yeah.
That's how I interpret it.
Yeah.
And they could have gone to Israel, but and now they're here. Yes, Andy.
I have another perhaps provocative question. Did Anna have a relationship more than friendship with her friend?
Eula.
Yulia.
Yes.
Yeah, I think she was definitely bisexual.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
my take on it. If not gay, but she did have sex with, Yasha.
Okay.
And I think the more provocative question is, she loved Yulia, but did Yulia love her?
Not the same
Not
way.
as much.
It wasn't the
Not
same.
in the same
kind of-
way.
Yeah.
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 But
You're
she
right.
did wind up with Lazar after all.
Yep.
And that was before Anna got in with her guy.
Right.
Okay, that was way before that. And
Yes.
she was very surprised when she found
Right.
them together.
Right.
So, yeah.
And the close proximity of their living struck me as we're in America, we're used to privacy, and here sort of in a common area, they're
No
doing.
such thing as privacy.
Yeah.
I also thought that their time in Berlin, Yulia seemed more free-spirited, and she really had, Anna was always paranoid and, kind of closed in, but Yulia really made a change. And by the time she got to America, and I think it was either Molly or Raisa who noticed that, she didn't dress provocatively. She tried to cover herself up. She sounded like she was a beautiful woman, and was trying, as she got older, and certainly in America, tried to get farther and farther away from that persona she had in Berlin.
Berlin.
Yeah.
What
Which-
is really intriguing in this story is to think about, like she goes back to try to stop Chernobyl, and just to personalize it a little, to think about things that you may have done or things that may have happened in your own life, and would you go back and change them? And if you did, would it change everything? It's like even your mistakes or your darker moments, maybe that led you to where you are. And that just is a very intriguing thought to me.
That's her quandary at the end of the book, or near the
Right?
end,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, that's all right. I mean, that's her granddaughter, Reza, thinks, can she do this time travel?
Yeah.
Because then she doesn't see Daniel, and there is no Daniel, there is no this or that. So, and that was a real struggle. It didn't happen that way at the very end of the book, but I like the way the author tied it back together at the very end. The author never really satisfied my curiosity as far as Reza's dilemma. Would she have done it?
Yeah. When you talk to, especially when you talk to Holocaust survivors, they talk about that their survival is by happenstance, luck, that if this hadn't happened, they wouldn't have survived, if that wouldn't happen. And so I take it in that vein that I met Arthur my junior year abroad in Israel. Well, what if I hadn't gone, and we were on a Tiul together. Eventually I would have met him. It was, 200 kids in the program, but like we met, and I don't know that you can, and people are very superstitious, and there's a lot of, what if this, what if that. Now, I will also tell you, well, I guess I can say, I think that meeting Arthur in Israel was a good thing. And we were talking in the office with somebody who works in the office, and her mother-in-law had a very abusive relationship, and that man is gone now. But she went into our bathrooms and she saw the Shalva posters, and she said, I wonder if there had been Shalva, back in the, let's say, even in the 90s, 80s, 90s, would I have called? Would that have helped me out? And I think that, today we're so used to talking about everything, you can bring up any topic, pregnancy, they weren't married, abuse, addiction. I mean, this book covered a lot of that, but nothing's, I don't want to say nothing's verboten, but there's so many things that you can talk about that growing up, I definitely did not talk about with my mother. Paula.
I think the author did a very masterful job of describing Molly's addiction and,
Yes.
and the addictive personality.
Yes.
And I think that hopefully many of us have not ever been in that mental state of that kind of despair and that kind of a hold. However, I think everybody can relate to the fact that you may have made some poor choices in your life, or may have had some toxic relationships that you should not have maintained.
Right.
And that was a real strength in this novel,
Right.
that she was able to portray that.
Yeah. And we've certainly seen other people make poor choices and have toxic relationships. And, we may see it, especially, with congregants, I see it years and years and years. And I sometimes say, what drew them together, these bitter divorces. Andy.
I agree completely with what Paula just said. And
Of course.
of course.
Well, that's good.
And I think the author, I loved how through the generations, ending with Raisa and Daniel, that was a good relationship. That was a good, solid friendship on mutual respect and interest. And that was nice to sort of end with that.
Yeah. So at the beginning of Atomic Anna, Yulia and Lazar believe that we can be anything in America. Discuss the reasons why they buy into this and why, and the way this belief changes for them over time. What do these characters want for themselves and for Molly? I was confused. Like, did they have green cards? Did they just get into the country and
it was never spoken about. We don't know. Nothing was said about how they came, what they got, and what they didn't get.
Didn't they come through Canada and they were never documented, I thought?
Yeah.
And I think that's why they couldn't get any legitimate loans.
Right.
Yes.
They had to go to the loan shark. I think they were undocumented.
Yeah.
And that's why they set up sort of their own business.
Right.
Yeah.
Elaine, you brought up before, the things that test your, not credibility. What did you say? Believability. Right. The whole undocumented for all those years. The other one, which I thought was sweet, but taking all that equipment on top of a building, with borrowed electricity. What high school kid does that? Come on. That was, Leanne.
I think that they, you asked what they wanted. They wanted her to be American, and yet again, another conflict, because they embarrassed her they were not, following along with what they wanted for her. I loved reading about young Molly and Raisa. I loved, all, because I thought to myself, wow, there are young women who talk with who talk to their parents like that in those days. I guess I was really surprised that she treated her parents the way she treated them. But I think again, there was this book is just full of conflicts. And I think, that was another one, what they wanted and what they were able to do even for themselves.
Mhm.
Right. This next question talks a little bit about that. The idea of assimilation is a strong thread throughout the novel and is present for every character. What effect does this assimilation have on Anna's, Yulia's, Molly's, and Raisa's lives? Discuss how the idea of assimilation is relevant in your life or in today's landscape.
Well, the assimilation was not just to integrate into another society. It was also a female-male integration that they weren't able,
Interesting.
that
Yeah,
they weren't able to really complete. So I think it was a double-faced sword. It
I didn't
wasn't,
think about that. You're right. Absolutely right. And I think that, Molly spoke as a first generation. I mean, she was born in Russia, but she spoke English perfectly and Russian perfectly. And did Raisa speak Russian? Yeah, because she spoke with Daniel. I think that in 2023, there's more, what's the word? People, it's a good thing when your kids are bilingual.
Mhm.
And, I know that like it would have been my great grandmother. She only spoke Yiddish. And, my grandmother could talk to her, but they didn't want my mother speaking in Yiddish. They wanted her to be English and go to school and all of that.
When I was a child growing up, I lived with my grandparents. And my grandfather was Persian, so that was a whole different language that he only spoke when the Persian relatives came over. But my
Farsi.
grandmother was from Russia, okay?
Yeah.
So she spoke Yiddish, and both my parents spoke Yiddish, but they only spoke Yiddish to each other. So when they didn't want us to know what they were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
definitely.
really am sorry about that because my knowledge of the Yiddish language is so small. I just know words and phrases that everybody knows because they never really helped us to learn the language.
Mhm.
But that was their reasoning. We
Yeah.
don't know what we're talking about, so we're speaking in Yiddish, and it works. We didn't know.
Yeah. And that's a dying language.
Yeah.
It is spoken in the Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox, in their neighborhoods in Israel and wherever they may live, in Brooklyn. And we read that book, Becoming Eve, about Abby Stein, the transgender. Like, she couldn't speak English. She could only speak Yiddish. And she knew Hebrew, but, it was biblical texts. Do you think that they acquired what they were looking for and do you think they're as assimilated as they wanted to be?
I think there was a semblance of it. I don't think it was the full, because the paranoia that you mentioned earlier. I think the paranoia of coming from Russia, it's got to be an enormous obstacle to believing that this is the land of opportunity fully.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can really, maybe it's like a religious conversion. Maybe you just have to accept it on faith. I don't know. But I can't imagine growing up in a culture like Soviet Russia and coming to America and accepting the freedom that we have here wholeheartedly and not feeling some hesitancy
And not being accepted.
and not being.
I think they were always a little bit afraid, even being here in this country, because they always thought that someone from Russia was going to come over and find them.
Right.
fine.
Come back.
Well, they lived in a Russian community. So that all they saw were the Russians and they didn't know, well, those that were relatives maybe, but they didn't know who was on which side of the
Right.
Tsar or whatever, Stalin, whichever person was in power at the time. I mean,
Yeah.
even Raisa, who's the third generation, don't make scenes, don't blend in, don't raise your skirts, don't do this, don't do that, don't be seen. Just go and study and do what you need to do and get ahead, but don't make yourself so visible.
We have a first cousin in Israel. And she's been there for, most of her adult life. And she has a very heavy American accent when she speaks in Hebrew. And it dawned on me that like her kids, she's got 3 boys. They're big, one's married. Their mom is the one with the accent.
Yeah.
Because and when she's there, she's American. And when she's here, she's Israeli. And that's kind of the same with them. When they're here, they're they're Russian, but when they're there, they're American. And here's another question. Throughout Atomic Anna, Molly and Anna both struggle with the intersection of their identities, Soviet, Jewish, and in Molly's case and Raisa's case, American. So describe the ways their identities are in flux or conflict with each other. Have you experienced something similar?
It's interesting that they had like different names, and the different names really like confused me until I realized like Molly and Manya was the same person. So that, that was very interesting. And I know sometimes if you take a foreign language class, they'll say, oh, well, your name in French is this, or your name in Spanish is that.
Yeah.
Which mine was never very different, but like Stephen is Etienne,
Right.
so they can be very different.
Right. And, when the kids come to Hebrew school, and when you're called to the Torah, when you're called to the Torah, you have a baby naming your brit, you're called to the Torah for bar mitzvah and after your wedding, your ketubah, and on your grave, you need the Hebrew name. And so, people can't find it, there's usually like a rush right before the kids bar mitzvah. But it's, usually you're named for someone. And maybe you are in English too, but not necessarily. So I do think that even though Hebrew names can be different, at least they're usually after someone or something like that. Do you feel that Raisa was fully American?
More than, yeah, definitely. I don't think not conflicted like the others.
Oh, yeah.
I don't agree with that.
Okay.
Not until she got into college and made friends. All she knew was her Russian community and not being allowed to be different than anybody. She spoke English, she spoke Russian on the bus, and then they all made fun of her. I don't think she was fully immersed as an American until she made friends in college through Vito. I think that was his name. Her Italian friend.
Victor.
That's
Victor.
that's a good point, Gail. I feel also so much of it is her disconnect from her mother.
Yes.
So I see both sides of that. That's a very good point.
Because the mother would bring her, would find out things about Atomic Anna and leave the book. And then she's like, oh my God, she was here, but she wouldn't stay to see me. That was, heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But she was raised by her grandparents who were Russian.
Yeah,
And that's what they knew. And that
Yeah.
was how they knew to raise her.
yeah,
Until,
I see your point completely, but I don't see her as that much different than the same child I was at 17 that went to college and was dropped off on campus and felt completely isolated and alone. You know,
but
I
that
think
was,
a difficult time, but I see your point completely. I
Yeah.
see
But
both sides.
Vanessa had asked if we thought she was totally
Civ-
American, and
Yeah.
that's when I said no. Listen,
Yeah.
I went to a high school that I thought was mostly Jewish. It wasn't, but I thought it was. And when I went off to college, certainly was not in the majority then.
Right,
And
right.
it was, even though intellectually I knew that I wasn't in a majority, I never felt that until, like you, Paula, I went off to college and I thought,
Oh,
look
Where-
at this world. It's
Gail, where'd
different
you
than
go to
mine.
high school?
South Shore High School on the south side of Chicago,
Yeah, so, all right, and where'd you go to college?
University of Missouri.
Oh,
Yeah.
They played and raised the the flag, the Confederate flag at every football game, and they played Dixie at every
oh my
football
God.
game.
Wow.
In addition to God Bless America,
Mm.
or whatever else we sang, but before every football game, there were 2 songs and 2 flags.
Wow.
Yikes.
Wouldn't have
Well,
thought that
but
about Missouri.
Yeah.
yeah.
I loved it. I mean, I loved my experience there. It was different being from a community like South Shore and Hyde Park
Yeah,
than, but
Definitely.
nonetheless.
okay. Well, to be continued, Gail. I have other questions. Got to get back to the book, though.
Yes, I
Um,
have to leave shortly.
Okay. This novel is full of complex parent-child, especially mother-daughter relationships. To discuss the ways each generation carries the trauma of the past, the ways they pass it along, and the ways they try to undo those hurts.
Right.
So how do they try to undo those hurts?
Well, obviously Molly tried to undo that with drugs and
Yeah.
her addictions. I'm not sure about the grandparents' generation, how they would have undo their hurts.
Well, I think that's why Anna wanted Yulia to take Molly to the States.
Yeah.
She didn't want her to be there under the oppressive Soviet, whatever she was under. You know, where you literally, you couldn't go anywhere. They knew everything you were doing. The amount of spying and how they kept tabs on everyone is frightening.
And she felt her husband was spying on her too.
Yes,
Everything that she did, she was being watched 100%. So
exactly.
when Molly was 2 years old, that's when she finally convinced Eula to take her, because she didn't
Yeah.
want to do it, but it took her a long time to convince her. And then
Yeah.
they acquiesced and said, yeah, they'll take her to America.
Yeah,
But I
Paula.
think part of that was the fact that Molly knew Yulia desperately wanted a child. And
Yeah.
again, Molly had all these other conflicts in terms of what she wanted to do with her life, or what it was.
Wait, you mean Anna?
Anna, I'm sorry.
I was like,
Right.
yes,
right.
Anna, absolutely. I agree
Right.
with that.
The other thing that I found it very interesting was Molly's parents' response to her addiction. And when she came home and they were trying to keep her clean, and I found them to be incredibly supportive. All of a sudden opening up to her and talking to her about feelings. When I say incredibly supportive, I mean, I think they knew her struggle, and they were trying to do what they could to support her. I just found that I was surprised at their response to addiction.
That it wasn't enough, or
No, that they tried whatever they could, to keep her
Clean.
Queen.
And away from him.
Yeah,
Right,
well, they
exactly,
hated
away from
him.
him,
He was a
but
bad
also
influence.
encouraging her. Yeah,
Yeah. he was a
I
bad
was
influence.
surprised about that, but pleasantly surprised about that.
Yeah,
Not that it was going to work, but
yeah,
just that support seemed to be there for her when
yeah.
she came back. I mean, they could have just abandoned her too.
Which they didn't, which was very progressive for the time period.
Right.
Yeah.
Paula.
I found Anna's acceptance of Yasha at the end of the book
Oh,
a little bit of a stretch. You know, I
Mhm.
felt like it was.
Wait. But the time travel wasn't a stretch. And on the top of the building wasn't a stretch. But
Right.
that was a stretch.
But you know what he had done to her emotionally and his controlling of her, and now he turned into this soft old compassionate man.
Yeah.
And
I like that part.
I did
like-
too.
well, I was getting to the point where I could see this was not going to be a sad ending.
Yeah.
So I was beginning to see that, you know, everybody wasn't going to die, that they were going to somehow undo everything.
Yeah.
But I'm not quite sure about that. I'm just not 100% sure about that as a plot point.
Stopping Chernobyl.
Yeah.
That's very unrealistic since we know it happened. So, I mean, that's a fairy tale almost.
Right, but I mean, there are plenty of books about alternative history, like Man in the High Castle and things like that. And we
Right.
know what actually happened, and it's a story talking about a what if or an alternate.
Oh, I mean, she's a brilliant writer, and her scientific grasp of this theory of all of this is
Right.
pretty incredible if you have any scientific background at all.
Yeah.
Her science is good, but her grammar is terrible. Don't get me started. Vanessa knows how much I can't stand bad editing, but repeated grammar errors where she'd say,
there's a
this is a photo of Baba and I. It's like, oh my God.
Oh,
are
no.
you killing me?
I think that was on purpose.
Oh, you do?
Absolutely.
Why?
Those Russians don't have good grammar. That's how they spoke.
Yeah, my
You
grandmother.
think that was intentional?
Yeah,
My
I do.
grandmother's first language was Russian, and then she spoke
Right.
Yiddish and very broken English. And she never
But
had.
there was never broken in other instances. I think that's just bad
True.
editing.
Well, it could be a little bit of both there.
Let's give her the benefit of the doubt.
Paula,
Well,
what were you going to say?
There were definitely some little glitches where like they're talking about a certain time period and that she has a calculator. Well, they didn't really exist then. And they talk about going to like a disco bar in the 60s. There were no disco bars in New York in the 60s. There were bars, there were places you could dance, but no one called it disco.
Yeah.
That didn't come to the 70s.
Late 70s, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
All right. Wait a minute. Here we go. Discuss the role of intention and morality in the novel. For instance, does it matter that Anna harnesses nuclear power intending to use it for good rather than as a weapon? Do original intentions matter? I thought about that a lot too.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Let's look at the internet. What was the intention? Was it to spread malicious non-facts, fake news? The intention was for it to be an information highway, not a misinformation highway.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
AI.
AI.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's just going to be
Terrifying.
It's terrible. Yes. Leanne, what were you going to say?
Me?
Yeah.
Nothing. I mean, in response to what Paula just said, information highway, but some people what you're believe that information. So all of those stipulations weren't, thought
No.
about or
They weren't,
defined before it all exploded.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's going to keep doing that. It's going to keep doing that.
From a scientific standpoint, I have to interject something about morality and information. Many years ago, when I was a younger nurse, I worked at a Catholic hospital. We had infants that were in mortal danger all the time because I worked in a NICU unit. And the hospital's policy was that we always do a code, always. There was no such thing as standing by or having a DNR. That was just not accepted 50 years ago.
Certainly not at a Catholic hospital.
Never in a Catholic hospital. I will tell you that as a staff member, there were often times where we did a slow code, a very slow code. When there was a baby with so many abnormalities and anomalies that were incompatible with life,
Yeah.
and that a baby that was abandoned by its parents and left there.
Mm.
And so because we have the capacity to do something like CPR, this is a moral choice that people make. And usually it's a good choice, but sometimes it's a difficult.
Yeah, I worked in high-risk obstetrics for many years, and we used to say that death was not the worst outcome.
No, it is not the worst outcome.
Because,
Very-
definitely you see these infants that are born extremely prematurely that are
Yeah.
never going to have much of a quality of life. And
Pain and surgeries and
Yeah.
no future, and so people can say what they want, but this is something that does occur in the medical community, and it still occurs,
Yeah.
but fortunately we've progressed in some institutions a little further than that.
Yeah. In Judaism, Gail, go ahead.
I wanted to go back to something Paula said about the internet. Many years prior, Newton Minow, who was a big executive and called television a vast wasteland.
Yes.
So, I mean, here we go
Yeah.
down the information highway, the vast wasteland. That was all. I mean, it came to my mind and I had
Yeah.
to open my mouth and say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
Sorry.
belonged to Legacy Solal.
Oh, did he?
He does.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And I think either his daughter
Oh,
did
his
and
daughters.
his
Nell.
daughter.
Yeah, they're all amazing.
Yeah. And they did an adult enrichment for me, which I can't remember now, but I've worked with them and they're all amazing.
Yeah, they're all impressive.
Yeah, very impressive. So back to Judaism.
So
In
sorry.
Judaism, you have Yetzer Tov, the good inclination, and Yetzer Ra. And we're all made in God's image, B'Tselem Elohim. But you need that Yetzer Ra that bad inclination to give you ambition and to move you forward. And I'm not saying that, discovering nuclear power was Yetzer Ra, but, maybe that's how you could explain some of that, what people do with whatever you make it's hard to keep a hold on. And, we, have either lived through or, we certainly know about Hiroshima, and we know about all, the terrible weapons. And now, again, in 2023, these school shootings with these bullets that explode in the kids,
Yeah.
and they have to have their dental records. I mean, look, I don't understand why you have to have an automatic weapon, why that they're even sold, and so on and so forth.
yeah.
Yeah, why do
it's-
the gun stores actually carry those kind of weapons? That's just supposed to be for military use, for the
Right.
services, not for an average citizen or even a gangbanger. They shouldn't
You
even.
know,
have it.
nobody needs that except for a military person.
Right,
Right.
And
absolutely.
that's not to say that people who do sport hunting shouldn't have their rifles, and people who live on ranches shouldn't have their guns to protect themselves from wild animals. But no one needs an AK.
Yeah.
No.
At Owen Sing Reunion Institute, the man who was like our, head of, not maintenance, but he like ran camp and he lived 5 miles away. He has a rifle and he asked us, when there's no kids there in the winter, and
I
he
have
would
to
hunt
leave
deer.
that. I'm
and
still
they-
online.
Wait 1 second, let me just move. That's what they lived on during the winter. If he hadn't made enough money and he had a ton of kids, he he ate that, whatever he hunted.
Right.
And so there's a big difference between Joe Heineke and
Yes.
these crazy people who are killing our children. So
But you
um,
can't eat anything you shot with an assault rifle.
exactly,
Right. Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely, 100%.
Paula,
Well, and when this amendment was enacted, we had muskets and cannonballs.
yeah,
We didn't have this kind of a weapon of destruction.
Yeah.
It wasn't, no one's saying you can't carry a gun. That's not what we're trying to say, but we
Yeah.
don't make this type of weapon available to anybody other than armed forces or police.
the characters of this novel grapple with the questions of time travel and whether just because you can change the past doesn't mean you should. If you had this power, what would you do? Should anyone have the power to change the past?
Vanessa should have the power to go back and wipe out Hitler.
Yeah.
So I'm telling you, I kept thinking about it. Okay, Chernobyl's bad, but I
Yeah.
could think of some other things.
There's
That
work.
would be a great fan question
Yeah,
to the author.
yeah.
That I loved your book. We love the characters. We wondered why you chose Chernobyl versus killing Hitler.
Right, because
You
they're
know, if
in
you had the
Berlin,
choice.
her and Julia are in Berlin, and they're kind of
Yeah.
undercover, and but it is a really big. In fact, I highlighted that same passage, Vanessa. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And who's to say if you go back and you change the thing that you thought you did that was really wrong, or someone else did that was really wrong, what would be the dominoes that would fall? I've often wondered, what if someone would have let Hitler into art school? He applied into art school and they denied him and didn't accept him. What if they had accepted him and he had become an artist? Would he have been a very different? He was born innocent. He wasn't born evil. So somewhere along the line, things changed.
You have to
Didn't
be
he have someone
carefully
who's
taught.
Jewish in his background? Wasn't there a grand someone in his life was
I
Jewish?
think so.
Yeah.
The Israeli satirical, The Jews Are Coming, they have a sketch where it's, I don't know, maybe one or two of them are Jewish, but it's Hitler's interview to get into art school. And they're like, oh, he'll never make anything of himself. And they're going on and on about him. And they're really cruel to him. But yeah, all of those things, and then if they're time travelers, would we know who they are? I mean, you can kind of get wrapped, like the necklace. Like, how did she get the necklace? Who had the necklace? When did the necklace, the bear necklace?
Yeah.
So I thought that was a nice touch. Leanne.
About not knowing who they were.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think the discussion about, the time travel and having that ability to change things is very, very, very deep. Because basically you're saying, should we allow people to play God? part of me believes that, I don't want to just simplify it and say things happen for a reason. And certainly there have been many moments in my life, if I could go back and do it over, or if something didn't happen, but then I say to myself, so many lessons were learned, even if some of them were very difficult and unpleasant, by those difficult things. And if you take away one difficult thing, is another one going to pop up? I mean, how do you make those decisions? And
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's kind of what life is. And that's how we learn. And, if you want to go deeper, say that, if we chose this life that we're in, then we chose these things to happen. So maybe the next life we could do better or keep learning. I don't know. I just think
Yeah,
it's
it's
a lot to it's a lot to unpack, to think that
Yeah.
you could change.
Mhm.
I don't know that I would do that.
Right. Going back to the NICU, now you can choose the sex of your baby. And, should we be doing that? All of those, I think there's going to be more and more choices for us as science and, artificial intelligence, moves forward. And, the science is changing, I think, faster than the morality and the checks and balances around it. That's what I think.
Well, I think unfortunately, as medical ethics has developed as a curriculum and as a science,
Yeah.
we're in society, it looks like we're disintegrating, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I see a big chasm between that.
Yeah. All right, it's 8:01. The next book, and I hope you like it. It's the 50th anniversary, or I don't know, 1970, probably even more, of Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, by Judy Blume.
And the movie's coming out.
Yes. So we could maybe even go see the movie. It's a short read. And I hadn't read it as a child. And it is amazing that the topics it covers for 1970 are amazing. And I think there's a rich discussion to be had, especially as women from different generations, and how we discussed with my mother, she talks about getting her period and getting a bra and
In the bus, yeah.
right.
Vanessa,
Yeah. Yes.
I am so glad you suggested that, because this week we watched the documentary, the Judy Blume documentary.
What was that on? I want to go watch that.
I think it's on Prime.
Okay, I'll go look.
And she was so ahead of her time.
Oh, yeah.
And such a beautiful person in keeping in touch with children who wrote her.
Yeah.
In response, I haven't read any of her books. And I was going to say, is it half-baked to read a young adult book, to read a Judy
and listen, it's going to be easy. It's 150 pages. So
Wow.
I can catch some slack on some of these edited books.
And
and it's something you might want, if you have kids. Wait a minute. Gail, let me
Just have to say goodbye.
All right, bye, Gail. Have a nice dinner.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So I'll send it all out tomorrow. I'll look for the documentary so people can watch that. Let's just take a quick look at the
Date.
So let's see. So May.
Not doing that.
Let's see here. Well, could we do May 18th?
Yeah.
Because we don't want to do the Thursday of Memorial Day.
Yeah.
And it's a super short book.
Short
So
book. It is.
Yeah. So you'll be good.
May
Okay.
18th?
the
Okay.
name of the special is Judy Blume Forever.
Hmm.
The name of her special.
Okay. Wait. Judy Blume. I got to write this in my notes. Judy Blume. And it's Prime?
I believe so.
All right, I'll Google it tomorrow when I'm at work.
And it wouldn't, I don't think, ruin the book.
Listen, the book literally took me, it'll
Yeah.
take you a couple hours. And
I never read it back in the day. and
neither did I.
I
I
never read
never
it
read
either.
it.
Incidentally, I just
never
read
read it.
it like
Yeah.
last week, and I think
Yeah.
it took me 2 nights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's,
Yeah.
don't you think we'll have a lot to talk about?
Yes, I think
Yes.
it's great. I think it's so fun.
Okay, so glad you all like it. I'll be in
Okay.
touch.
Okay.
Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
bye.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Vanessa.
Vanessa.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.